Right, so this video is going to be a bit different. As you guys know, last year I was making my way through Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn and and Stormlight Archive, and breaking news as of yesterday, so it's not quite breaking anymore, but broken news. The Cosmere film rights and TV show rights for the Cosmere have been picked up by Apple TV Plus. I'm not going to talk about my frustrations of them being on Apple TV Plus and probably my most hyped adaptation ever. Probably more hyped for this than I am any kind of MCU or DC thing even. Because these are things that are fresh in my mind and are things that I really enjoyed and the characters that I love that are finally being brought, I want to say finally, I read these a year ago. I don't really have the kind of right to say finally. Also, I think the Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series, is 10 years old, so we can't really say finally. Well, it's 11 years old as of this year. Can't really say finally, but these are things that I've found a recent love for, that only a couple weeks after finishing Wind and Truth, get the news, Adaptions coming. I don't know how soon, probably not soon at all, considering we don't have, it's literally just papers have been signed, there's a deal in place. There is no, production starting, there is maybe a screenwriter, but there is no cast, there is no crew. All we know is that Brandon Sanderson will be more involved with this than Rowling was with, than J.K. Rowling was with Harry Potter, and that fucking what's his fucking name? Oh, this is going to fucking more than J.K. Rowling was with Harry Potter anyways. But yeah, I'm excited for these. I wanted to come in here not to talk about the logistics of the deal and to hype up my own hype for these potential shows, movies, things that are going to happen. I wanted to come in here and do kind of a bit of a series of videos. If this one does well, and by well I mean probably gets over 50 views, I would like that to be the case. If this video does well in the grand scheme of my channel, well, then I will make this a series of, casting. I will start with the Mistborn trilogy, Mistborn Era 1. I haven't read Mistborn Era 2. I might do a casting video on Era 2, on the Era 2 books, when I've gotten to them. But I wanted to start with, this video will be the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, simply just titled Mistborn, or the Final Empire. And then I'm going to do each subsequent book, because that's going to be apparently a trilogy of films, which I think is great. And then Stormlight Archive is apparently going to be a show, which I think is perfect for that, because those books are too big to be movies. They would need to be 4 hours each. So, turning them to shows, they are pretty much paced like a TV show anyway. So yeah, I think that's probably more befitting of the Stormlight Archive anyway, because it should be allowed to be massive. Mistborn, though, I want to come in here and I want to cast, for today's video, the Final Empire, or just simply Mistborn. And we start off with the main character, I was about to say titular, the book isn't called Vin, but I want to start off with Vin, the main character of the trilogy, the main character of the first book especially. And, there's, if you're going animated with this, which I think it's live action, I would hope it's live action. My initial thought is I would prefer the actors to be unknowns, apart from you've got to slide in Henry Cavill somewhere. He so much wants to be in one of these, and he's in Brandon Sanderson's phone book, or at least they've had conversations in the past. So I think in either this or Stormlight, Henry Cavill needs to be involved in a way. And I'm gonna put him in Mistborn, and there's a character that I have for him that isn't the main pick, but he's the one that I think would be the most interesting. My Vin, though, ideally it's an unknown, and I think in execution, in practice and execution, Vin will be an unknown actress at that point, an unknown actress that becomes a rising star, and a bit of there for a minute. But that's not interesting for the video. You guys want to know. You guys want me to attach a name. I think if animated, Ella Purnell or Haley Steinfeld, anyone from like Arcane, right? Because that was so great. Those characters have very much the same vibe. Hence, that world kind of has very much the same vibe as Mistborn. So I would do that. I don't think those actresses necessarily are a live action Vin. I don't think they have the look necessarily. But my mind goes to X-23 in Logan. My mind goes to Daphne Keane when I think of what a live action Vin could look like. I think that's kind of my idea, kind of like someone who looks a little bit rougher, or who has done like a little bit rougher previously. And and Daphne Keene's also been in his Dark Materials, so she's not afraid of doing these like high fantasy things. So I think she's probably like my perfect pick anyway, for what I had in my mind anyway for Vin. I want to move on to Elend Venture, because he's kind of the other like protagonist, and he gets more to do in subsequent books, but in the first book, this is kind of this he's a royal, yes, but he's kind of like meek. He's a bit nerdy. He's like always carrying around books with him, and I think the vibe that I get, and I don't really have a 100% grasp on what he's like, or who can do kind of the rise to the more heroic character that Elend Venture becomes in the second and third book, but third book especially. I went with Jacob Bertland from Cobra Kai. He played the character that becomes Hawk in that show, and I feel like that kind of vibe, because like he can physically do an action sequence when it comes to it, but he also is a nerd in that show. I feel like other characters in that, like Sholo Madueña, doesn't fit the bill for me. I don't feel like, for Elend Venture. I feel like Elend Venture should be, look, clean and proper, and should kind of, because he is a royal, but he should also feel, timid and shy. I feel like, I know his name is kind of a meme at this point, but I feel like Tom Holland has Elend Venture vibes. I feel like that would be a much less cringy name to throw out there if he wasn't Spider-Man, especially if he wasn't Nathan Drake. But I feel like he's kind of... I feel like Tom Holland might be the better choice. He's also a Brit, which I kind of want to keep this in the kind of pocket of Brits. Tom Holland might be stretching a little old, though, but he still does very much have a baby face, and could definitely play, Peter Parker is essentially Elend Venture anyway. And that journey that Peter Parker makes, especially in the MCU, is very similar to what Elend Venture goes through in the books, or in Mistborn. So yeah, I think, fuck it, Tom Holland might actually be a better choice for... Tom Holland might actually be a better choice of Elend Venture than Hawk from Cobra Kai. It's just, I wanted ideally someone blonde, but, hair dye exists. The next character I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about Kelsier and Marsh. I'm getting ahead of myself. Kelsier and Marsh at the same time. This is what's confusing about Mistborn and Stormlight Archive. You have a character called Marsh, you have a character called Mosh. It gets confusing. At least it does in my head, reading the two so close together. Marsh, I think that's your Henry Cavill. I think Henry Cavill is Marsh because Marsh, slight spoiler alert for the Final Empire, Marsh is allowed to be in subsequent books. It also allows Henry Cavill to be a sort of baddie. Sort of. I don't feel like he's the right pick for the Lord Emperor, but I feel like he is the right pick for Marsh, someone who kind of starts off as a hero and kind of gets corrupted throughout the books and throughout the series. It also gets him to work with a lot of prosthetics, and hopefully they do prosthetics when doing the Steel Inquisitors, because I feel like that would make them look scarier if it's prosthetics and done practically than if it's just CG. I feel like that. Maybe they should be slightly CG to look bigger, to look so much bigger than the rest of the characters, just so that they feel like more of a threat. But I feel like they should be done practically, especially the heads, the kind of shards of metal going through the eyes. I feel like that should be done practically. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like that's your Henry Cavill. And Kelsier, this might not be anyone else's pick, but I feel like if they're brothers, I feel like they should look similar. So my pick for Kelsier is Matt Bomer. And, I know I was trying to keep as picking Brits. However, Matt Bomer and Henry Cavill look very similar. Look incredibly similar. And I get that vibe from Matt Bomer that he's just a nice guy, and that he can do the scenes. Like, when Kelsier does eventually have to make his sacrifice, I feel like it would be more emotional if it's Matt Bomer making that sacrifice than, say, Henry Cavill making that sacrifice. For me, anyways. Plus, you can always just get him to do a British accent. I don't know if he's any good at a British accent. I haven't seen him do it before. But I'm sure he can give it a go. But yeah, I think Matt Bomer as Kelsier probably makes sense. It makes sense in my head if Henry Cavill is Marsh. We then have, moving on to some of the members of the crew, I don't have good enough names for everyone in the crew. I only have a good enough name for Hammond, and maybe Dockson. Dockson I always, in my head, saw as older than Kelsier. I always saw him in my head as being like a kind of a senior. I saw him as being quite short. I saw him as kind of a Smee to Kelsier's Captain Hook, or what would be more of a better terminology would be if Kelsier is Captain Jack Sparrow, Dockson is, the guy that follows Jack Sparrow around. He's not necessarily like a Barbossa, but he's like the guy that's with Jack Sparrow in all those films that I forget the name of. But I'm sure you guys know what I mean. So I was initially just gonna say it's that guy. Just cast that guy. I don't know his name, and I didn't look it up because I found a different actor that I think is better suited for Dockson. Just someone that comes across as a nice, down to earth bloke. For me, when I think of like the nicest people or people who have recently played really nice people, I think of Toby Jones. He just has that vibe of like he's the guy that you go to ask for advice. He doesn't necessarily get involved in all of the fighting, and he is more of a like in the background second-hand character, even being the second hand of the Red Skull in the Captain America films. I just feel like, and also he's a Brit, which helps. But yeah, he just gives that vibe of just being like nice. But yeah, I do have a pretty good pick for Hammond as well. I don't have a great pick for anyone else, so I'm gonna save them for when I do the second book. They also have more to do in the second book, in my opinion. Hammond, though, straight away I had a good name for. Like, pretty much the voice that I read Hammond as was Ralph Ineson. And he has that look of, if I were to describe the look of what I picture Hammond as in my head, rugby player is what I kind of, Hammond, ham-fisted. He's kind of the muscle of this thieving group. Ralph Ineson, his voice is insane. Like, that if you watched Fantastic Four, that if you've played Final Fantasy 16 and other video games where Ralph Ineson provides the voice. I think he just looks like a guy that's like, ready to fight, and he just has that kind of like you know, he just kind of like has that vibe of the guy sitting at the back of the pub just waiting for someone to come up to him and start a fight with him. He kind of has that vibe, and that's the kind of vibe that I have from like Hammond. I do also have the last two characters that I have. Lord Ruler I'm going to leave until the very end, but Sazed, I think I have a different name to what a lot of people are going to say. But the vibe that I got from Sazed was, again, we're going back to Logan, and we're going to who played Caliban in Logan. We're going to Stephen Merchant. I think he has this like sagely wisdom to him. It helps also that he's quite tall and lanky. So when he does have scenes where he has to kind of like bulk out, it feels like more of a shock. Like it would feel like more of a shock. There is this kind of like mystery with Sazed about how cool and powerful he is. And it's supposed to be surprising when he does become like that, or when he does do that. So I'm thinking, who is the most unassuming guy that has that same like sagely vibe? I feel like Stephen Merchant has that, especially in Logan. He just kind of has that kind of vibe of like unassuming. You can kind of like, he can be in a room and you can kind of just forget he's there until a moment where he has to be badass. And there are several moments that will allow him to be badass. And yeah, that's just kind of, maybe I read it completely wrong in my head, but that was the actor that I kind of attributed to Sazed, was like a Stephen Merchant type. That's definitely the vibe that I had in my head, was him, especially how he is in Logan. My pick for the Lord Ruler, and pretty much just because I feel like he was done really dirty. I feel like he was the best part of Thor Love and Thunder, but he was done really dirty being a great villain in a not great movie. I feel like Christian Bale would be the perfect Lord Ruler. I feel like he has that vibe in spades. There were parts reading, especially the younger and the way that the Lord Ruler looks, when he finally appears, that kind of were like, he's kind of being described as Jared Leto. But then I remembered every film that I've watched Jared Leto in, and I don't like any of them. I don't like any of them. And when Jared Leto is in a film, he's bad. And those films don't do well either. I want Mistborn to do well. I want Mistborn to also be good. So I don't want Jared Leto anywhere near this movie. I don't want him anywhere near any of these films. Or any of the shows, for that matter. So, yeah. But I had to kind of mention that I got that vibe from the Lord Ruler. I think it would be funny to get him in for like 5 seconds to be a baddie that kind of is kind of this like Wizard of Oz type character where he's seen as being all powerful and he really isn't. Or he's just someone that kind of gamed the system a bit and just kind of, he rose up by belittling other people. Although to counter that point, Christian Bale is an amazing actor. He's much better. He is a Brit and and can act circles around Jared Leto for days. So he's also a little bit insane, which I feel like helps. So yeah. Christian Bale, Lord Ruler, do it. Get it in, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. But that is my cast that is everyone that I had a solid name for Mistborn 1, for the first Mistborn adaptation. If you liked this video and want to see who I pick for characters later in the road, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, all that lovely good stuff. Put in the comments below who your picks are for this. Like I said, I think one of these is going to happen. I think Henry Cavill is probably going to be Kelsier. And because I think that's the role that he would want to play. And I think everyone else will be an unknown. I think if anyone else is likely to be in this, I think Ralph Ineson is 100% likely to be in this. He loves working in fantasy worlds. I think he would lap up the chance to work with Brandon Sanderson. And I think Hammond is the perfect character for him as well. So those are the ones that I think probably could happen. I think there is no way that there is a Cosmere thing that exists. There is no way that there is a Cosmere thing that exists without Henry Cavill being in any of it. To the point where I think Henry Cavill is probably going to play Hoyd. To the point where I think Henry Cavill is probably going to play Hoyd. I don't actually think that. That's not the character that I want him to play. I've already said the character that I want him to play, goddammit. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed. See you guys then. Peace.